Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Two Steps Forward, our daily Bible study. I'm James. This is my wife, Aid, and we are up to episode 321 in Matthew chapter 8. So we're out of the Sermon on the Mount, but moving into the rest of the narrative portion of Matthew's Gospel. And so if you need to pause right now to read through Matthew 8 on your own, please do so. But here's my personal paraphrase. After the Sermon on the Mount, large crowds continued to follow after Jesus, and a man with leprosy knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus said, "I am willing, be clean," and the man was cured. Jesus told the man to go to the priests for verification, but not to tell anyone else. A centurion then came to him in Capernaum and told him that his servant had suffered paralysis. Jesus offered to go and heal the servant, but the centurion said, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Just speak to my servant, and my servant will be healed." When Jesus heard the centurion's confidence in him, he said this man's faith was greater than anyone's in Israel. And he explained that many outside of Israel would come to the feast in heaven, but many within Israel would not survive that judgment. Jesus told the centurion to go, and at that moment, his servant was healed. Jesus then healed a fever in Peter's mother-in-law. Many demon-possessed people were also brought to Jesus, and they were healed as the prophecies foretold. The crowds continued to follow Jesus, and one teacher of the law said he'd follow Jesus anywhere, and Jesus responded by saying that he has no home here on earth. And another disciple, these two situations are sort of lumped together. Another disciple asked Jesus if he can follow him, but says, I got to go and bury my dead father first. But Jesus said, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. We'll talk about what that means. Jesus and the disciples were on a boat in the Sea of Galilee, and a huge storm started. Jesus was sleeping, and the disciples panicked, woke him, and asked him to save them. And Jesus responded by saying, "You of little faith." He rebuked the wind and the waves, and everything was calm. And the men were amazed and asked each other what kind of man he was, that he could even control nature. They always assumed only God could do that. When Jesus got to the other side of the lake, two demon-possessed men from the region of the Gadarenes came to him. They were violent and shouted, "What do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" The demons begged Jesus to send him into nearby pigs, and he told them to go, and they entered the pigs, ran down into the water, and the pigs died. And the people who saw what happened here spread the story. And when the town came out to meet Jesus, what they did is they pleaded with him that he would just get out of there. In other words, his miracles impressed them, but they didn't want him anywhere near them because they were afraid that they might be next in judgment. All right, that's Matthew 8. Anything?
It's really weird to me that Peter has a wife.
Yeah, so the fact that his mother-in-law is mentioned here.
Like, when is he ever home?
Yeah, well, he's traveling a lot. He's
at least for 3 years he was gone.
A lot of wives can sympathize with that, I think. If a husband who travels, or military, or professional athlete, or...
I mean, maybe military. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, could she go with him?
Yeah, so there probably was some of that, but generally speaking, assuming they have kids, probably not a ton.
So I don't know if you know this, but one of the young seminary wives maybe, I was talking to, and she said that they do now at the seminary when they're doing assignments, they do an interview with the husband and the wife, and they say to the wife or to them, like, would you be okay going elsewhere, or like, do you need to be my family?
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they did not do that when.
And I feel like it caused a lot of people to get out of ministry because their wives were so miserable. One of the maybe factors their wives were so miserable being away, so far away from family. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's whenever you're using sort of an earthly process, I think you have to keep in mind that humans are human, that we all have different relational needs and considerations, health and otherwise, mental health, physical health, etc.
I always say if they would have asked me, I would have been like, I'll go to Russia, hands down. Send me to Africa. Like, I would have been totally fine with that, but no one asked, so.
Well, they didn't think Russia was ready for you. So I'm not sure America's ready for you, to be honest.
They didn't think anything outside of the Midwest was.
Yeah, well, I think admittedly, figuring out what is going to be a right fit for someone's future is really difficult.
Yeah.
Usually that's something that can only be done retrospectively. But I think that level of humanity is important. So, yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so devotional thoughts for the day. Number 1, Christian confidence. So numerous centurions are mentioned in the New Testament, and they're almost always talked about in very positive tones. They're very even-tempered, courageous men. They're capable of high-level management. Obviously, they're in charge of 100 soldiers, so there's got to be some level. We've been talking about this recently. There's some level of managing other human beings is be sympathetic to whoever your managers are. Managing human beings with independent and often sinful wills is so difficult. Managing something non-human is not easy, but it's a lot less stressful, I think, in many ways. Managing other humans is really tough. What's really noteworthy here is the Gentile man's confidence in Jesus' capacity. So the centurion is aware he's a Gentile, Jesus is a Jew. A Jew, generally speaking, would never enter into a Gentile's home. And the man is very sensitive to that. And he also gives this incredible articulation of the idea of, Jesus, I know you're powerful. I know you're capable of extraordinary things. And I know you're busy. You don't actually have to come into my home to heal my servant. I care deeply about my servant, who's paralyzed at the time. But I know that you can just speak it and it will happen. And Jesus says, this is better than any faith that I've seen demonstrated amongst the Jewish people. Like he gets who I am. He gets that I'm able to heal, not just heal, but heal from afar, which suggests I'm more than just a healer. I'm actually God. So the confidence that the centurion has is due to the character and capacity of Jesus, without yet seeing it. And Jesus says, that's what faith looks like. It has, you recognize my character, my goodness. You recognize my capacity, my power. And based on the track record of what you've seen, you're convinced moving forward that I'm going to make good on my promises. And he says, that's what faith should look like. That's the faith that we should, he wants everyone to emulate. I think the centurion's faith, whenever you see like sort of a superlative faith like that, it exposes some of your own weaknesses. What do you think here? When in trouble, Christians could fail to go to Jesus in the first place, which the man does. They could fail to express confidence in him, which obviously the man does here, and they could fail to think of others ahead of themselves. So he's going to Jesus not for himself, he's going to Jesus for the sake of his servant who's suffering paralysis. Any one of those you think is the most common temptation? Failure to turn to Jesus, failure to turn to Jesus with confidence versus just like complaining at him, and failure to come to Jesus asking for the sake of other people.
I don't know, all.
Okay, there's none of those that you think is particularly for you, or just all of them?
Maybe like the confidence? I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, not that there's a right or wrong answer here.
Because like if you got cancer, I would pray for you. Okay. But I don't think I'd be that convinced your cancer would go away. I've seen no examples of that.
Well, right. So you're saying...
Like, is that a lack of confidence? I know God could do it. I just don't think he's going to do it.
Well, but would you pray that way? Like, God, I know you're capable of this. Which, even just praying that way, I mean, James tells us to pray boldly. And I think that's what it means. Not with a bullying God and telling him what to do, because he can do whatever he wants to do, but boldly, I know you're capable of curing this. Like, that's, I think, what we're supposed to emulate there.
But is it a lack of faith if I'm like, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to?
Yes, I do think, I don't think that has to enter into the equation of the prayer. You know, like, I think we reasonably manage our lives.
What's the prayer then?
But the prayer is like, Lord, you can do all things. I'm asking you for the recovery of in this case, my spouse, or, you know, my friend. And you will do according to your will, and I will praise you no matter what, but I know you're capable of this. You know, And that's what bold, confident prayer is. Not like, but I know you probably won't do this. Like, I don't think that, I think that violates the concept of courageous faith.
I know he can, I just don't think he's going to.
Well,
I don't think he would.
It's not your job to speculate at that point.
Okay.
Though. I think that's what the, so like, but also even turning to him, which by the way, if you think, I don't think he's going to do it, you're probably not going to turn to him in the first place, which is when you talk about people's absence of volume in their prayer lives, it's because they don't think they're going to get what they're asking God for, right? So making sure we turn to Jesus, with confidence based on his character and capacity, knowing that whatever he deems is going to be right anyways. And 3, making sure we're turning to him not only for ourselves, but for others. Devotional thought number 2 then, the cost of discipleship. So verses 18 through 22 tell about 2 men. One is a Jewish scribe who's actually already a disciple. He's not one of the 12, but he's one of the many disciples that Jesus is sort of training right now. The scribe wants to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, well, yes, that would be great, but I want you to understand I have no place to lay my head. And he tells him about how hard discipleship will be. The next guy wants to follow Jesus, but he says, I have these family duties. My non-believing father has passed away, and I need to take care of the family. I need to make sure that I bury him and make sure I go through the business matters of that. And Jesus says, let the dead bury their dead, which at first glance to a lot of people sounds really harsh. All of this is, I think, sort of properly lumped under the category of the cost of discipleship, which means following Jesus is abandoning this world, abandoning some of the pleasures of this world, specifically for the purpose of urgently doing God's work and spreading his word and building his kingdom. Many people will say, I want to do it. So that's what this lesson of those guys teaches us. A lot of people are going to say, I want to do it. I want to do it. And they just don't end up doing it because it costs too much. Being a disciple just costs too much. And they're like, I'm not going to do it. So Jesus is telling people, there's very few religious leaders historically who do this. When people come and try to follow them and they say, calculate the cost of what it means to follow me before you try following me. Jesus is the only religious leader I'm aware of who ever does that. It's really interesting to think about. So if you're a disciple or follower of Jesus, at a minimum, what should it cost you? At a maximum, what do you think it would cost you?
At a maximum, your life.
Okay, let's start there. Bottom line. Yep. And it has. Historically, it has. Right?
Columbine.
They weren't because they were followers of...
Yeah, that one girl, I think her name was Cassie. They asked her if she believed in God, and she said
You're
yes.
right. The killer did, yes. Was it God in general or specifically Jesus Christ? I think you're right. I think they were Christian. I can't remember.
But... DC Talk wrote a book about it. It's called Jesus Freaks. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Believe me, I've read the book.
Well, it's just, historically, when we talk about the cost of discipleship, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book is Cost of Discipleship, and he dies specifically because he refuses to recant on God's word. At the minimum,
it's going to cost you time and money and energy.
Okay. Jesus says anybody who's not willing to abandon their life. And he goes through relational ties. He goes through, it's financial, it's, time and energy and ego, which I think is one of the understated biggest things. Like you have to empty yourself of your ego if you're going to follow Jesus Christ. But it's going to cost you something. And one of the reasons why I think human beings in the realm of suffering don't like it, in part because they're sometimes shocked by it. Like they assume things should be better. They expected things to be better. In fact, I've read some interesting stuff on how people who believe that humans are basically good, in other words, they're a little bit naive to human nature, are significantly more likely to experience PTSD. And so anybody can experience PTSD. But somebody who has a misperception of human nature is more likely, when they go through the exact same events, to experience it because they're shocked. They're shocked by the suffering. And so Christians are going to go through as much suffering as the rest of the world, in some respects more, but they should be less shocked by it when they understand the nature of this world, the prince of this world, and their own flesh, kind of thing. Okay, so there's a cost attached to discipleship, Jesus says. Third devotional thought, the testimony of demons and unbelievers. So the accounts of demonic possession in the New Testament are super revealing. The testimony of demons in the New Testament are arguably the best and most accurate statements of who Jesus actually is when you compile them together. So human beings sometimes struggle to figure out who exactly Jesus is, but the demons always identify him instantaneously, and they know his power. They know his they don't understand everything about his plans. In fact, they say things like, well, why are you here? Are you trying to torture us before the appointed time? Mm-hmm. Which is why the demons are absolutely befuddled by the cross. They don't understand that plan. In fact, God actually deceives them in some respects. Like the cross, they think that they're winning. So my point is they're not all knowing, but they're much smarter than humans. And you can tell it by their testimonies in the gospel. You can also tell when demons are active in people's lives, what it does to them. What are the effects? So, like, since you can't see demons, sometimes you're looking for the fingerprints of them. So the two individuals who are mentioned here, these two guys, they're robbed of their sanity and their self-control. So they don't have self-control. They don't have coherence and sanity. They're filled with fear and paranoia. And they actually have been socially isolated from home and friends. For that matter, the non-believers in their community are not particularly helpful to them at all. They're also influenced by demons. They isolate these individuals and they actually restrain them. They tie them down. When these guys are freed of their demons by Jesus, the society's main concern is, shoot, we're losing money. Because remember, Jesus sends them into the pigs run down into the lake, and they lose a bunch of money, and they're concerned that Jesus is present in their lives. And they're like, we were doing fine without you. And when Jesus comes into someone's life, it actually rearranges their priorities. It means they can't do whatever they want. If you want to know, why so many people are perfectly content to be non-believers, it's not because there's lack of evidence in their life. And if I just give them a little bit more evidence, then they'll believe. No, Jesus rearranges your priorities. It means if he's God, you have to live according to his will. And most people will just say, like, please just go away. Mm-hmm. Just go away. I want to do life on my own terms. One of the interesting things, it's actually not mentioned in this gospel, it's mentioned in Mark's gospel, and Mark 5, one of the guys, when he's cured, he asks Jesus if he can follow him. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, no, I want you to go back to your region. I want you to go back to your city. I want you to testify to your friends and family about what I have done for you. And that's really what our commission then is. The Great Commission is to not tell other people how to live their lives necessarily, to not just try to be the most moral people on the planet, but when experiencing the healing of Jesus Christ, go and tell people about how God has been undeservedly good to us. Mm-hmm. Right? Now that's probably going to show an increased amount of things like self-control and morality and kindness and interpersonal relational health. Mm-hmm. But it's basically tell other people about how God has been undeservedly good to you. So in a society that has little to arguably zero awareness of the presence of demonic activity, is there anything that you can look at that you can confidently say demons are very clearly influencing our lives in this way or that way?
Yeah, they spill my coffee all the time.
Yeah, that's a interesting. I'm still not completely convinced that isn't a motor skill thing on your part.
Last night I had a dream in which I was involved in illegal activity. And I woke up and I was just thinking about it, and I was like, oh no. I was like, man, now that I've had this dream, I feel like Satan is going to tempt me with this. Mm-hmm. And then I had to remind myself that I don't think he can know my dreams or thoughts, can he?
Correct. He's
only
not
my actions.
Yes. He can observe your lifestyle and see what you seem susceptible to. Right?
Yeah.
So, he's going to keep tempting you until you're able to, by God's strength.
Then why do you have bad dreams that can sometimes, where you're not always following God's will for your life in your dreams? Mm-hmm. Why does that happen?
Because you have a sinful nature. So Satan, you have a fallen flesh. Satan, it's not like you're a blank slate that he just tempts and convinces. That's what Adam and Eve were. But since we've inherited their DNA, we have a pre-existing disease.
Made his job a lot easier.
It makes us more easy to deceive than they were, So we have a fallen flesh that's already there, and he doesn't even need to technically do anything, and we want to rebel against God. But he comes and he's like the phrase rabble rouser, like when people stir up, he's stirring you up and thinking you shouldn't be paying attention to him, or you deserve to be bullying that person on the road because you got places to go. And we're going back to your examples. Was that yesterday or today? I can't remember.
Yesterday.
But point being, you know what I mean.
He knows I got business to take care of.
Your flesh already wants to rebel, and Satan comes along like a really nice friend and says, yes, you're right.
How can I hear him? If he can't read my thoughts, how can I hear him?
Right. You're not going to audibly hear him. Okay. So you just have to be aware that he is trying to arrange things in your life so as to give into your flesh. All right. So we should close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for making us your disciples. We know that you've chosen us to be. We also know that if we're going to commit to answering that calling, it's going to require something of us. It's going to require humility and work and energy and sacrifices. And we're only able to make these when we have our eyes focused on your sacrifice for us. So we ask that you forgive us for our unwillingness to follow at times. We ask that you help us fight our flesh that never wants to follow. But we ask that you help us submit to the Spirit, your Spirit, which you placed inside of us, and seek to continue to do your will and be ambassadors, that we can be people who, because you have conquered Satan for us, we can resist temptations, but we can also, freed from some of the power of those demons, we can go and tell people about your undeserved goodness to us. May it glorify your name. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks for studying with us today. We'll see you next time from Matthew chapter 9.